So I'm going to look at our collections. You've probably seen a variation of this picture already in various places, probably on the programme. I have to say that I'm one of the curators who was very, very pleased to welcome basket makers into the museum. It's a collection that we have a lot of baskets in the museum, but it's not something that I had looked at in depth or thought particularly about until people have come in from outside and have shown interest and have sparked my curiosity to try and find out more about these baskets and where they come from and how they were used and how they were made. So a lot of our baskets came from they were collected by people who donated things to the museum, so a variety of sources. Some of them we actually inherited with the buildings. The museum was opened in 1969, so it's a relative youngster, and it was opened in a series of buildings connected to the fishing industry in Amsterdam. And one of these had been used as a fishing store. So a number of our baskets actually were bought with the building. Another thing I would have to say is that unfortunately we don't have the detail of documentation that some of the other collections have. But from looking at the archive photographs that we have, and also from looking at the baskets themselves, and from speaking to people who used them, and looking at documentation, then we can start to build up a picture of where they came from and what they were used for. But again, as Catherine says, if anybody else has got any ideas or thoughts that they can chip in and help me to learn more about my collection, I'll be very, very pleased to hear from them. I'm going to talk about the baskets that were specifically made for purposes in the fishing industry. We have various examples of domestic baskets in the collection as well, but even just looking at the fishing baskets, there's such a range there that we'll talk for an hour and a half, which would bore everybody else to tears, so I'm not going to do that. So we've got baskets that were used at all stages of the fishing industry. On the left is an eel trap for actually catching fish. Beautiful leather edging around the openings there. On the right is a salmon net float, which is a globe-shaped basket painted black. We have fenders. So on the left is a boat fender, and on the right we even have a boat itself. So I'm going to concentrate on the main areas of fishing and talk a bit about the baskets and how they were used. One of the main principles of methods of fishing in the 19th and 20th century, that's the period I'm going to concentrate on because that's where our collection is basically comes from, was long lining. This method was used to catch fish such as cod, haddock, whitefish that swim at the seabed, and they would be caught with a baited hook. In order to maximise the efficiency, you would have a great number of hooks on a single line, and you would be out at sea with your single line and its many hooks, and you can see examples of some of the fantastic words that are used there as well. And there were two main techniques. The first was small line fishing. This was a family affair. Generally, the woman was involved in preparing the gear for fishing. They would be out collecting mussels to use as bait, and then they would put them onto each hook and then coil the baskets into these, coil the lines into these baskets. And you can see a great variety of the baskets there. This is St Andrews, up on the harbour. The line could be up to a mile in length, and it might have about 1,200 hooks on it. So she could be up in the early hours collecting mussels just for a line. This was done inshore, and each man would probably have about 2 sculls to take on board with the lines. The children were sometimes involved because when they were coiling the line into the baskets, they would layer them with grass in between times, so that they didn't get tangled. They shot it very easily. interesting fact here, it was not uncommon for a woman to work a 10-hour day to prepare her husband or her father's dinner. So a bit more about the baskets. This is a typical East Coast basket. They are generally this sort of shape, an oval shape with a raised back and a lowered lip at the front so that the lines could be played out easily. But obviously they would be able to carry a large line with them. They tend to have two handles and they're quite often reinforced underneath where they would be on the deck of the boat. There is some interesting regional variations in shape. This is, as I say, kind of the boat, the type that would be used in Fife or in East Meath Fife. However, in Ely and in Pittenweem, this kind of wooden skull was used, and it's performing exactly the same function, but it's made of a totally different material. In areas in the Moray Firth, they used the wicker skulls, but they seem to be, from the photographs, deeper and kind of shallower, deeper and shorter. In Gordon and Arbroath, they were much longer and flatter. In Buckhaven, they were also made from wood, but instead of having the wooden base like that one, you can see that the base kind of curves up at the back, and the sides are shaped to fit that curve. In Buckhaven, they seem to have a flat back with an oval cut into the wood, and then there's wood steamed around the back of it, and much longer again. And that is also seen in, I've seen it in photographs quite consistently in North Berwick and Dunbar. And why there should be the same preference for that type in Buckhaven on the north shore of the Forth, and then on the east coast at North Berwick and Dunbar, I don't know, but they seem to be exactly the same, but separated geographically. And I think it's interesting, going back to what somebody said earlier on, perhaps it comes down to materials, perhaps with cane being imported from ports. Maybe those Madeira big ports used cane and other people used the wood, I don't know. That's something I would really appreciate some thoughts on. The other form of line fishing was gartland fishing, or great line fishing. This was exactly the same principle of a long line with smaller lines attached with the hooks, but this was done offshore in the deep sea, and the lines could be up to 15 miles in length. And each line might have 5,000 hooks on it. In this type of fishing, this is a steam liner, an Aberdeen steam liner. I think in the 1950s. They would be out for weeks at a time. This is the Arctic ice, you can see. So they wouldn't be baited before the fishing trip, they would actually be baited on board. So that the baskets were taken on board with the lines in them, and then the fishermen would either take a small net and catch some herring and bait the lines, or they would buy some fish at their last landfall before they headed out to the fishing grounds. So that is a Gartland skull from the museum. They are the same basic shape as the small line skull. They have interesting variations. They tend to be larger, obviously the line is heavier and longer. And they also have a feature at the back, the high rim at the back, they have a length of rope, or sometimes cork. And this was for hooking the hooks into. Because these were taken on board unbaited, the hooks were kept neat in this rope, and the fishermen would actually bait the hooks as they were playing over the side. This shows some baskets being loaded on board the Radiation of the Aberdeen. Again, you can see the rope around the one edge there, and I don't know when the transition was made between the Gartland skulls and the Gartland baskets. My thinking is that it's something to do with the boats getting larger and there being not so much need for the lower lip at one side of the basket. If you've got a boat with kind of a high gunnel and a deck, then playing something out of the basket is probably just as easy as having something with the lip on it. Again, if anybody's got any ideas, I'd be happy to hear them. And these are just a couple of features of a couple of the baskets in the collection, showing the rope around the edge with the hooks all in. The top basket we had for many years one of our volunteers who was a line fisherman, and he came and redded all these baskets for us and tidied them up. So he put the hooks into the ropes. And the one at the bottom, it has these leather kind of end pieces to the ropes. It's the only one that I've seen that has that deep degree of finishing off. The main kind of area of fishing that people think about in the Scottish fishing industry, of course, is the herring. This was the mainstay of the fishing industry in the 19th century through until the First World War, Second World War as well. The Scottish fishermen would follow the herring fleets, follow the herring shoals around the coast of Scotland, starting off in the Hebrides, right around the north coast, and then down the east coast as far as East Anglia. It was a largely Scottish affair, even when people were fishing in English ports, and a large number of the fishermen and also the shore workers would travel this annual migration. It was also heavily regulated. It was a big export industry. There was a huge interest in quality control and standards, and making sure that when the herring were salted in the barrels, they were the right amount of salt, and they were properly gutted, and they were packed in the barrels within 24 hours of being caught, and so on, because Scottish herring has such a high reputation abroad. And there was a great push from the government and regulatory bodies in order to keep the standards high. One of the things that they were hot on was the measurement of the catch, and this is a basket known as a quarter cran. The catch was measured in crans, which was equivalent to about 1,000 herring. And these baskets were ubiquitous along the coast. They were used to land the catch and also to measure the catch, so that you could tell how much each boat had landed, and therefore how much the value was, and they could get their wages at the end of the day. The baskets were made to a regulation size, and you can see on this one it's got an official stamp, and this one I think says 1930 JJ. It's not the year 1930, it's a code number, and the basket, it's not the basket maker's initials, it's the inspector's stamp. So, and they were really quite strict about this. I have read in the annual reports for the Fishery Board of instances where baskets were rejected as being too small a size and therefore would be over measuring the catch. Unfortunately, of course, I couldn't find the reference to it. From about the 1940s, the fish started to be measured in boxes instead of in baskets, but the same or similar baskets were still used to land the fish, and they had all this equipment, fitted to the baskets to land the fish. This has got an iron cam hook bracing thing in order to hold the basket up. So it would make sense to use the same size and style of basket, even though it would be use the fish to measure. And there's a picture of them landing, that's in St. Helens. And I think, as Stephanie said earlier on, even in the prawn baskets that you see today, it's very similar shape and size, even though it's molded out of red plastic. So these designs do continue on. Obviously very, very useful and functional form. The one place that didn't use these was Yarmouth in East Anglia, and they had these very distinctive baskets known as swills. We only have one of these in the collection. Obviously it's not a Scottish basket, but a lot of the people using these baskets in Yarmouth were Scottish fishermen and Scottish fishermen. And we also have a model this way. And again, they were made to regulation size. These were half crown size. I don't know why they evolved into that shape. They're kind of like a figure of 8 shape. They're obviously kind of shaped to the body, perhaps it made them easier to carry. But there is a very good museum down in Yarmouth, Time and Tide Museum. So just get in touch with them whenever my interest has been piqued and see what information they have. So from the catching of the fish and the landing of the fish, we go on to the selling of the fish. And this, again, is a very iconic fisherfolk image with the creel and the little head creel on top and the costume, which was very much admired by various people in royalty. This is an example of the creels. This is a creel from our collection, and also, obviously, I can't photograph. Unfortunately, I don't have any information on where the photograph was taken. But these are the baskets that the fisherwomen would use to carry the fish from the seashore, obviously, inland to the towns and cities to sell their fish. They seem to be pretty much of a muchness in shape. Some are slightly more rounded at the base, some have the ends finished off at the top, others don't. I've brought along a model which is in the other room, which has the back kind of shaped slightly, which is a bucky creel. But they would use the main creel to carry the fish, all different sorts of fish, into the cities, and then the top one carried their chopping board and the knife that you see on the left there. It's a fisher roll, fish roll. Agnes Fairney, and she's got her board and her knife, and she's gutting the fish at the doorstep. Absolutely, yeah. Filtered or head on, as you like. And even sort of into relatively modern times, they were carrying the fish, taking them on the train in their creels and taking them around the houses. And we also have pictures of fisherwomen who would take the creels, go and sell around the inland villages, and then fill up with kindling and carry the kindling back in the creel. So, some variations. This one on the left is a top creel that would be balanced on top, and the one on the right is our broke bit. There's a few of them about. Again, it's the shaped basket that we want at the back of the hip. The picture on the left I like because it's a man selling fish, and it's the only picture that we have of a man doing this job. That was taken in Pittenweem, and as was the one on the right. And you can see them carrying the creels with the strap across the chest there and over the shoulders, and the arm creel as well. And I just looked this one in. This one's interesting. They're collecting bait in Fisher Row in Musselburgh. And in all the other pictures that we've seen so far, the creel is carried across the chest. But in this one, they are very clearly carrying their creel around their heads. I don't know if this is because what they're carrying is not quite so heavy, or if it's because pictures of fisherwomen selling fish in Fisher Row show them with the strap around their chest. But these are.
I think to have your hands freer.
I don't know.
Free movement, perhaps, for actually taking them.
Just interesting. So again, back to this question of where did they all come from? As I say, we are not as well documented as some of the other collections in this, and we inherited a lot of baskets and not a lot of information. We do have quite a good archive collection. I mentioned the Fishery Board reports. We also have census records, and I have got a record of a basket maker from Kilrenny, Thomas Oliver, listed in 1861. We also have this is a painting from the 1930s. It's by a painter, John McGee, who painted a lot of fisherfolk, and he's a Glasgow boy. He had a summer cottage in Pittenweem. This is Alec Black of Pittenweem, who I think is the great something grandfather of my assistant curator. Nice wig. Making a skull in his loft. An interesting kind of detail of the picture is that his chair has no back on it. Apparently, once the chairs got worn out, they got the backs sawn off, and they were relegated to the loft for stuff like this. That's just an aside. But this is the only picture that we have of anybody actually making one of these baskets. And it's interesting to note that the fishermen didn't think it important to note where these baskets came from. We have record books of chandlers' shops, and we see the fishermen buying the baskets, but there's no record of where the chandler got them from. And yet, a Glasgow artist thought it was an important thing to make a study of. The one thing I can think of is that people, like others have mentioned, were making these things either in their spare time or alongside something else. I do know, slightly tangential, of a chap in Pittenweem who used to make rope fenders for all the boats. And he was a fisherman, and he then retired and continued making his rope fenders. He would not be listed in any trades directory as a rope maker. He would not be advertising anywhere as a rope maker, but everybody knew that if you wanted a fender for your boat, you went to Billy Boynton and he would make your fender. And you can see, all the boats in the harbour have his fenders. So he is a maker operating very successfully, supplying the local community. There are no records, no official records of him. It's just word of mouth and knowledge. I'm assuming that perhaps the basket making went on the same way. Although there are some that show a degree of uniformity that you think, well, perhaps something else is going on, perhaps this is a more professional approach. This is one of the Gourdon skulls, which is the longer, flatter shape. I've taken a picture of the base of it to show the reinforcements underneath, and also the top. Stephanie mentioned earlier in the Arbroath baskets the use of steamed wood, laminated wood, and this is also seen here, and you can see on the handle there are actually 3 layers of wood that have been laminated and steamed together. This would suggest to me a familiarity with techniques of boat building and also access to those materials and equipment. There were boat building yards in most small fishing ports in Scotland, either building or repairing boats. And this is a picture of the one that was opposite the museum. And the kind of strange wooden construction kind of coming towards you on the left is the steam box. And this was used for steaming planks. Obviously, boat planks, and they come in most amazing shapes when you actually see them not on the boat. And they were steamed into these shapes. So that kind of technology and equipment would have been around in fishing ports. My own assumption is that that's what was utilised. And again, I think that's probably what explains these wooden skulls with the very curved wooden back on them, which you see in some places. But it would be interesting to know whether steamed wood is used in baskets that aren't in fishing communities, that, inland communities. Is that a kind of a common thing, or is it just fishing or boat building areas that have that? So I have to say, this has been kind of a brief rattle through. I could have spent everything else, but this has really opened my eyes to our collections and the wealth of things that we have in our collections. And the more you look into it, the more questions you find, the more things you want to find out about. And the interest is obviously there from craftmakers and there's a couple of models that we have in the museum. The interest is definitely there from other people coming in, so I think it's very useful to be somewhere like this and hopefully pick lots of things and find out more about our collections, which we can then interpret and pass on to our visitors and people.
Thank you very much.